So what we did last week was we set up the individual tasks, and if I just roll them up again, we've got the semester project, we've got the prototype house, and we've only been working on the prototype house so far, and we just started to divide it into deliverables and all that kind of stuff. And we also talked about summary tasks and linking tasks together. So everybody has now internalized that and understands exactly what I'm talking about. Yeah? No. Okay. So we've got the tasks set up. So the next thing we want to do is set up our resources. And resources is a nice capitalist word for human beings. So what we've got here on the left, we have the Gantt chart, which is this time chart, which is a nice graphical representation of the scheme, of the schedule. Over here we also have something called a resource sheet. So if I click on resource sheet, I get this empty box here. This is where you can put your resources in. So resources are really who is working on the project, and there's a couple of ways of doing it. We can type it in. Let's say we call this John, and if I press OK, John turns up in the resources, and you can see that he has an initial. They've given him an initial. They've given him a standard rate per hour, overtime hour, and all overtime. So you can actually get an overview of the cost that it's going to take for your individual project to be actually built in terms of cost per hour. So let's put in all the resources. I'm going to put in John. Let's put in Paul. Let's put in George. Whoops. George.
You need to have some girls as well. Otherwise the group won't work.
Well, we've got Ringo. So John, Paul, George, and Ringo. So this is our work team. These are the guys that are doing the project for us. Now we can go in individually. I can double click on this and say John. We can give him a cost. Let's say we're going to give him a standard rate. We're going to give him 500 kroner per hour. 500. And we give him an overtime rate. That's time and a half. Let's say 750. And press OK. And we can continue to do that through all of the people that gets a certain time per hour. Let's well, Ringo's probably only worth about 300 per hour, but anyway. So let's give Ringo 300 per hour. It's okay. George is also worth 500. And whoops, Paul is worth 500. Okay. So now we've got our entire team set up for the project. We know who's going to be working on the project. All we need to do is assign them to the specific tasks. So if I go back to the Gantt chart by pressing this button again, we can see that the individual tasks, if we double click on those, we should be able to assign a resource to each of the tasks. So I can go in here and I can say, well, functional diagram, that's going to be John that does that. Okay. And the name appears linked to the task over here on the right. Okay. We can also make it so that it's not just one person doing it. Maybe the functional diagram is everybody. So we have John, George, Paul, and maybe Ringo is not so important. Okay. So we've assigned the individual task to the amount of people we think it's going to take.
You could just add a group, could you? Could you add a group?
Yeah, I think you can. I think you can add it to one of the. I'm not too sure of the new version, but I think you need to play with it a little bit. Anyway, I think what I'll do now is I'll show you. if we have assigned, let's say, let's say, what do we do here? If we say the functional diagram here is half complete, we can actually keep track of how far we've got in the individual parts of the project. So this is what I would recommend that you do in your team meetings, is that you actually set up a very specific task list based on what you think you're going to do. And then at your team meetings, you can set up here and you can say, well, we think the functional diagram is maybe 50% complete. Click on 50%, and you can see it actually makes a separate little line in here that tells us it's 50% complete. We can go through all the tasks in the same kind of a way. And if you go through it methodically, and if you do it every week, you can keep a very strong track of how far you've got in the project, but also, since you've assigned the individual tasks to individual people, you can see who's doing what and whether they're doing it or not. And then you have a report you can print out that shows whether it's done or not. So it's actually quite a useful thing. I mean, I've set this up, these functional diagram, all these views, I've actually set these up as tasks, but they're really deliverables. So all these really depend on that a computer model has been made, because we have location plan, we have site plan, we have dimension floor. All these are dependent on somebody setting up a BIM model. So I'm actually going to select them all, and I'm going to break the link between them, like this. So they've suddenly got no specific start date. And then I'm going to go and insert a task above, and I'm going to call this deliverables. And once again, like last week, I'm going to select all these and I'm going to indent them. So suddenly we have a summary task, and all these deliverables are within this. If you're making a computer model, it's unlikely that all these drawings will take you 2 days to do. You know, a furnished dimension plan. This is all part of the computer model. So what I would do is, the functional diagram is the key thing. We need to know what the functional diagram is before we start making the BIM model. So I'm going to insert another task. Insert task, and I'm going to make a BIM model. And we'll say the BIM model takes 5 days to make, because you're only starting. A house like this, in reality, once you get good at it, the BIM model will only take you less than half a day to make, but or even a couple of hours. So let's say 5 days, and then we're going to try and link the BIM model to these deliverables. So now we can see that the BIM model has to be finished before these individual elements have to take place. We could go higher again. We could say, okay, insert a task here at top, insert task, and I could have put in iteration 1, iteration 2, etc., etc. So you can be very specific as to all the work that needs to be done within your project. So iteration 1 links to iteration 2, because iteration 2 can't happen until iteration 1 has happened. Okay? And then the final functional diagram can't happen until the final iteration is done. Does that make sense? Yeah, okay. So once that happens, you can see that the functional diagram hasn't moved in front of iteration 2, and that's because it's manually scheduled. So I need to, oh, where is it? What's going on with it? Oh, these are manually scheduled. So I can select everything and auto schedule it. Oh, why is that still behind? Oh, it's because we gave it a specific date. Yeah. Move it out a bit. So you can quickly start to play with all this stuff. You can assign the BIM model. Let's say there's somebody in your group who's very good at Revit all of a sudden. So you can assign a resource to them. Let's say Paul is good at Revit. Assign. And that's kind of how you start to set up tasks and resources with each other. Once you've done that, you can use the reports tool here to see as to how your progress is going. So we've got an in progress task here. We can actually select a button here to see what's late and what's working well and what's behind schedule and who's responsible for what and so on. So there isn't much more to MS Project than tasks, resources, and reports, and you have to kind of play with those within your own project to see how you start to use them. But I definitely would like to see reports regarding late tasks or progress of the project or how things are going, in order so that you can keep track of what's going on. You can also have a look at task cost overview, all kinds of stuff. Any questions about that stuff? Not from Question Guy. No. Okay. All right. That's a short video, but what I want you to do now is start to set up your MS Project file correctly with your correct team members. Put in your correct tasks. Sit around in groups and actually set up your tasks correctly if you haven't done it already, and then make a realistic judgment as to how far you've gone in terms of each task. Okay? So that's what I want to do until lunchtime today. Okay?